So we're going to be looking at the author's intent. Now, we looked at this briefly last week, so I'm just going to recap it here. So this is when we have to look at the ambitious vocabulary and possibly any figurative language that's used. And we've looked at figurative language before, so your similes and your metaphors and your personification. Now, when we find them, we need to think about why the author has used those vocabulary choices and if they give a certain meaning or an inference to the text. Okay, and we looked at the example last week. If the author said that the water in the lake was still and reflective, however, for effect, they could describe the water as like a sheet of glass. So it's using that language to give that impression to the reader when you don't have a visual to follow. So these are the type of questions then we know that we could be asked. So what does a word tell us about something? Looking at a specific phrase, could be looking for a similar or a metaphor that means something. Could be examples we have to find and copy, or think about why the author chooses to use a particular verb or an adjective. And we're going to focus a little bit more on that last one today. So you have a copy of this at home in front of you, and we're going to stick with this over the next few weeks. So what I want you to do is I would like to pause the video and I'd like to have a quick read of this to remind yourself of the double life story. Okay, so I'm going to model an example to you for our reading skills, and then we're going to have a go at doing one together, and then you will have a go at doing one on your own before I set you off on today's task. So she pounded the pestle into the bowl beneath. Now we know when it's in italics, we know that's a quote. So that's a direct quote that's come straight out of the text. So what do you think? Why do you think the author chose to use the verb pounded? So what I need to think, well, what is the question asking me? Well, it's asking me why I think the author's used something. So I need to highlight the why. So I'm looking for a reason, but I'm looking for a reason for them to have used the word pounded. Okay, so I need to find some evidence in the text that's going to suggest why they've used that specific word. So let's find the evidence in the text. So it comes from this little part of the text here where it says that she pounded the pestle into the bowl beneath until the substance within was ground to a fine powder. So I'm going to start with my opening sentence part on here. Okay, so the author has chosen to use the verb pounded because. So I need to explain, well, why have they used that verb? Okay, so katana is crushing gemstones which have very hard properties. Okay, we know that gemstones are quite hard. Okay, so in order to try and break them down into a powder, we've got to use some kind of force. Therefore, they need to be broken down with force in order to get them into a fine powder. Okay, so that use of the word pounded means that we've got to really put pressure down to be able to grind them. So now I'm going to link it back to the question and link it back to the word. Okay, so the word pounded suggests she must use a lot of force to break them down. Okay, so I've explained why the author's chosen to use the word. We've signified that the gemstones have hard properties. Therefore, to get them down to that ground fine powder, we've got to crush them, and we're going to have to crush them hard. Okay, and then we link it back to the verb. So the word suggests that she must use a lot of force to break them down. So we've almost clarified that final part of our sentence. Okay, now you'll notice here that I wasn't just looking at that word, she pounded the pestle. Okay, into the bowl beneath. I read a little bit further to look for the reason why. Why was she pounding it? Well, she was trying to turn the substance into a fine powder. So I know she's gone from taking it to a rock into a powder. And I need to think, well, if I know that I'm going to smash rocks together, I'm going to have to put some force into it. If I flick it, nothing's going to happen. If I poke it, nothing's going to happen. But I've got to use some good force to break it down into that small powder. Okay? So let's have a go at one together. So have your sheet out in front of you. I've got a copy of both of the next two questions for you on your sheet that I've sent home to you. So the quote we're looking for is that she had taken the time to examine the unusual blue gems. So why do you think the author chose to use the adjective unusual? So this is where you need to think, well, what is the author actually asking me? Okay, so let's think about what the main focus is. We're looking for the why, so we're going to highlight the why together. And now you need to think to yourself, well, why am I looking at this question? Why do you think the author chose to use the adjective unusual? So I need to be looking for that word in the text. I'm thinking, I'm going to highlight that word, okay? So I now know, looking at that question, I've got to find something about the word unusual, and I've got to explain why the author's used it. So now I'm going to have a look and see if I can find this adjective in my work. So have a look at the sheet in front of you. Can you find the sentence? Okay, so I found the sentence here. So it was only when she'd reached the safety of Brittlestar stronghold that she had taken the time to examine the unusual blue gems. Now I'm going to go back to my question because my question's looking for that adjective unusual. So I'm going to highlight that sentence of unusual blue gems. And now I need to think, well, why have they described them as unusual? So first of all, let's start off with our sentence starter. So we know how we write a full sentence. So rather than writing down the question, think about what's our question stem going to be that we can start our answer with. Okay, well, let's try that then. So the author has chosen to use the word unusual to describe the gems because. Okay, so this is our question stem that we're now going to be answering. So now we need to think of, well, what do we know about the word unusual? Well, if we describe something as being unusual, describe it as being weird or as being strange or not something that's very common to come across. So I might say the gems she has found are rare, which means they are not very common. Okay, if we came across something unusual, it's something new, it's something unexplored. So I've explained that she's come across these rare stones. So it doesn't state there that they're rare, but I know from reading previously in that text, I know that they're rare stones. So I know that when something's rare, we don't have a lot of it. But now I need to explain, well, what does it mean when we say they're unusual then? So I might say this means the gems may not have been seen very often. Okay, so their appearance is new to humans. So now that's explaining as to why she's described them as unusual. So we know that the gemstones are rare, therefore they're not very common. But by using the word unusual, it means that because it's not something we've seen very often, it means that the appearance is something new to us. It's not something we can easily recognise because they're not very common gemstones. So well done if you managed to have a go at writing that answer with me. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to have a go at this one on your own. So you also have this one in front of you as well. So in the text it says it glinted dully. What impression does this description give you about the quartz spear? So what I want you to do is to highlight the key parts of your question. Okay, so think about, well, what is it that you need to know? What's the question asking you? And what vocabulary can I highlight that I might find in the text? And then you need to go and find that part of the text and read around it to see if you can write your answer. So start off with your question stem because that's going to help you first. So pause the video and have a go. Okay, so I've underlined what impression. So this is to me as a reader, what impression I get. So how do I feel and think about this statement? And we're talking about the quartz spear as being dull. Okay, so I'm going to find that in my text. So here I can see it said that it glinted dully. And I know that I'm talking about the quartz spear here. So if we read the whole thing, it tells me there's plenty like it if you find it for the right price. Its cloudy white point is its point is very cloudy and white, and it glinted dully. Okay, so my answer that I put here was the word dully suggests to me that the quartz spear isn't shiny. So now I'm talking about the properties of what it looks like because my description has described what it looks like. Okay, rather than its monetary value or any other properties, it's describing the way it looks. Therefore, it then has a matte exterior. Now, matte is when we have something that's not shining. So rather than it giving off a shine, it's completely matte, it's blank. Now, usually, from what we know, reading on, gemstones that are shiny are actually rare and very expensive, like diamonds, okay, or fire opal. Now, because it says here that it glinted dully, I know it's not shiny. And I know that it also said there's plenty like it as well, so it's not a very rare gemstone. Therefore, this tells me that the quartz isn't either of those things. It isn't expensive and it isn't shiny or rare, okay? So I've just linked it back to the question there, okay? So well done if you had to go answering that one on your own. So your task now for this lesson, so I've sent these questions home, you've got 5 of them, and I want you to have a go at completing them, and it's based on pages 37 to 39, so the pages we've read today. You need to make sure you highlight the key parts of the question and look for the vocab, find it in the text to be able to help you and read around, and use your background knowledge of what you already know so far about chapter 5, because that background knowledge is going to help you piece together parts of your answer. Okay? Good luck, year 5.